that is a distinction of Eastern's business programs, is that we're thinking about business as being not solely for maximizing profit, but really focused on transforming society. So business is a powerful, powerful tool for world transformation in terms of all the ways you end up treating your employees, the types of business you develop, the ways your business can interact in the community. So we talk about at Eastern, our mission is to equip students to become transformative change agents in business and beyond. So that's our focus. And we do that by integrating into our curriculum the idea that business is a calling. So just like any other mission is a calling, business is a calling, and business is a calling to relationships, because every business transaction is an economic relationship. Right. And in every case, you can choose how you treat the other person on the end of that economic relationship.
On this episode of TLC Connections, we sit down with Dr. Christa Lee-Chuvala, Dean of the College of Business and Leadership at Eastern University, to explore what it means to approach business not just as a career, but as a tool for meaningful impact. Christa shares her unique journey from urban economics to higher ed leadership and how Eastern is preparing students to become ethical, forward-thinking leaders in a rapidly changing world. From radically affordable online programs to business consulting experiences for undergrads, this conversation sheds light on what makes Eastern's approach to business education both distinctive and transformative. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Welcome to TLC Connections, the podcast where educators, counselors, coaches, and community leaders come together to inspire change, one connection at a time.
Christa, we are so grateful to have you here. So thank you for your time.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I'm just going to jump right in and ask about your role at Eastern University. So talk about what your role is there and give us a typical day in the life in your day.
Sure. So I'm the Dean of the College of Business and Leadership at Eastern. I've been at Eastern for almost 8 years now. Been dean for 3 of those 8 years. It was a surprise. I came in as a faculty member, teaching economics, statistics, leadership, doing a whole range of things, and then the dean opportunity. Didn't really have any aspirations to go into a dean role, and it kind of came out of the blue. But it's been really fun. So I would say, as I'm sure you also know here at the Lincoln Center, a day in the life is a little. There is no day in the life, right? Okay. Every day it's a mix of a fire that you have to put out, paperwork that you have to do, a student issue you need to address, and higher level strategy thinking about what are our programs going to look like next year, right? So my door is always open. So a typical day in the life when I'm in the office is that people are in and out of my office, kind of connecting with me, and that's really important to me. So then trying to get all of the sort of more mundane key aspects of being a dean, like approving exceptions to policy and doing, so trying to get that done can be a little bit more difficult.
So you wear multiple hats. So what's your favorite hat?
The strategy. Well, two things. The relational aspect. That's kind of, Clifton's strengths. I'm highly relational person. So interacting with all the people on my team who are amazing, and the faculty, staff, and students. So that I love that in all of its various forms. But the strategy thinking, trying to think innovatively toward what business schools are going to look like in the next, however many years, or how AI might integrate into our programs, like thinking strategically, or whether we want to offer go in a direction of a new doctorate or something like that. Thinking about all of those types of things is my favorite part.
What you just said prompted a photo that I took a screenshot of yesterday. This is a quote from Bill Gates just a couple days ago. Mm-hmm. This is a quote. It's very profound and even a little bit scary because it's happening very quickly and there is no upper bound. He's referring to AI.
Yeah.
Within 10 years, again, a quote, AI will replace many doctors and teachers. Humans won't be needed for, quote, most things.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of thought have you given, as the dean of the business school, what thought have you given to AI in business and from a business perspective, but also AI in the academy? How is it going to affect like the future of teaching in higher ed?
Well, so what's interesting is how it's going to affect. So everything's moving online anyway, right?
Right.
So one of the things that we're doing at Eastern is kind of in line with our motto, which is faith, reason, and justice. Putting faith, reason, and justice together and applying them to all of the things that we do at Eastern is providing a sort of radically affordable education in the online space. So how do we do that? Part of the ways that we do that is by minimizing some of the grading that needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so in one way, if you're going to provide radically affordable education that gives people access that maybe wouldn't have thought they would go back to school or, get an MBA or get an undergrad degree, using AI in those types of ways is absolutely going to be imperative, right? We're going to have to use that kind of AI-based grading. Now, at the same time, I think we're going to have to increase touch points with students from real people.
Yep.
So, and the transparency is also key, right? We need to be able to say, because it would be easy to not highlight that you're getting AI feedback, right? Because it's becoming more and more conversational. It's becoming less obvious that it's AI, but that is someplace I definitely want to go in line with our faith, reason, and justice motto. So I think we are going to have to lean in. We're going to have to combine that with transparency and real in-person touch points.
Yeah. We've talked about previously how you've used the word special. Eastern's a special place.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what makes it special from a student perspective. So let's talk students first.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to a potential listener might be thinking about getting their undergrad or their master's or even their PhD? What makes Eastern special?
Sure. So I think particularly on the undergrad side, when we're thinking about students coming to campus, Eastern is a unique place for people who either come from a position of wanting to explore their faith more or not, or people who are kind of, not anti-Christian faith, but also not so sure, right? There's a deep place for exploration at Eastern in terms of faith. And that is kind of exemplified in, we have a whole range of people from different backgrounds and different political persuasions, different ideas about the world that coexist together at Eastern. And, given the world we live in now, that feels miraculous to me.
Right.
And students get that experience too. They get to learn from people from all parts of the spectrum in terms of thinking, right? And so I think if you're looking to explore the world and life, Eastern provides a unique place to get a lot of perspectives and to come up with your own. I also think that Eastern has a very strong community. The faculty are very dedicated to providing a community experience for students. So coming together, the undergraduate piece of it, the in-person undergraduate piece is very is small and connected. So there's a lot of chances to interact with students, between students and faculty and that type of thing. When we're thinking about the online space, again, we are offering what we're trying to do in the online space is offer a really unique return on investment opportunity for students. So in addition to being radically affordable, the quality of our programs are very high. So that is demonstrated in the fact that we have really high satisfaction ratings. Our students are like 90% of our students are completely satisfied with the program and with different programs, MBA and our online undergraduate program. It's reflected in, we do a benchmark exam called the Peregrine Test, where we test students on their business knowledge when they come into the program, and then we test them on their way out. And what we're finding is students are testing in the 86th percentile of business knowledge, and that's compared to all of the other business schools with our accreditation.
Wow.
So they're really coming out with a strong business education that's fully online. And the other thing that we're really focused on is flexibility. So you can we offer 7-week courses that run all the time, and you can kind of come in and out of the program as you like and kind of do them. You can take 2 at a time, 1 at a time, and you can do all of your work in those courses. There's no deadlines within the 7 weeks. So it's fully flexible. You can front load it, you can back load it, you can take all the time and work around your class schedule or your work schedule or your life schedule to do all of the work in the classes. So that's something that students really appreciate and gives them the opportunity, maybe if they didn't think that they were going to get their undergraduate degree or get their MBA degree, that they can shape it around their life. And that's been really effective.
So let's talk about what makes Eastern special from a faculty perspective. So you were in Massachusetts. You got backgrounds and experience working, going to school and working for places like Harvard, MIT. I'm sure you had lots of options. How'd you get from Boston to Philly?
It's a great question. So Eastern really is a special place, and I have stories about that. So when I went to school out in Indiana, and Taylor University, it's a Christian school out there, and a couple things happened. The late Tony Campolo, who, if for your listeners who don't know who that is, he was a powerful speaker and advocate in the Christian community around basically faith, reason, and justice, bringing together faith and justice to transform the world. What are we doing? And he would go around speaking across the country about what are you doing to change the world, and how is God calling you, and how are you participating in that call, and what does that mean for the people who are the poorest, the people who are the most marginalized and in the world? What are you doing? And so he had a wide following. He spoke all over the country for decades, and he was a professor of sociology at Eastern. And so he came out to Taylor, and I listened to him, and I was absolutely enthralled because he was saying all the things that
This was undergrad. So
this
you were
was
what,
undergrad.
19, 20 years old?
Yeah. And I, you're an undergrad, you're thinking about what your next steps are. And he was basically saying, what are you going to do to make the world different? And how are you going to transform it for the people who are struggling the most? Right. And I thought, Eastern, what is because he would represent Eastern. What is this place? This is amazing. And then at the same time, one of his mentees, Shane Claiborne, who is basically my age and was at Eastern at the same time, was doing some radical things with a community that he developed called The Simple Way. And they moved into a neighborhood in Philadelphia. This is when I'm 19, 20. He's 19. I think he's a couple of years older than me. And they moved into a neighborhood, and they were advocating for people experiencing homelessness. They were, doing sit-ins sleep-ins at churches, and really connecting with people who are suffering. And the word got out. And so Tony would talk about what Shane and his folks were doing at Eastern. And I thought, I should have gone there. I should have been there, because that's the type of person I want to be. That's the type of life I want to live. And so Eastern was always in my head. And effectively, when I started thinking that I might go into, I didn't know that I would go into higher ed right away. But when I started thinking I might go into higher ed, I thought, well, I'm going to try and get the best degree I can get, so that if Eastern ever has a position that's open, they would have to say yes, right? So I don't know if that was, it wasn't like that was the only thing I was ever thinking I was going to do with my life, but it was definitely a consideration. Yeah. So then I did go get my PhD, and then I started looking, and a position opened up in teaching economics, and I thought, this is exact. And then I got to be the person to fulfill that position.
Wow.
So So Eastern was calling me for a long time. It's a special place.
Tell me about your academic journey. Like, I don't know when it started, elementary, middle, high. Like, when did you know you wanted to go to college? When did you know that you wanted to be, or did you have any inkling at that time that you were going to one day be the dean of a business school? Or like, what did you aspire to be
Sure.
as a young girl, young woman?
That is a fascinating question because, I will say, and this is certainly revealing something about me. I'm not a forward thinker in terms of strategy about how I want to live my life, and I never have been.
Okay.
So when I was young, I had different, maybe I'll be a lawyer, maybe I'll be maybe I'll cut hair, maybe I'll do, I was all over the place. Big range. And I've always been very focused on the things that were in front of me. And I just did the best I could on the things that were in front of me. And for me, a lot of that was school. So I just whatever I had in front of me at school, I worked really hard and I did the best I could, and I liked school. Interestingly, I will say that like many girls, I wasn't steered in the direction of math, which is I think it's interesting. It's hard to parse apart gender dynamics, right? But I think what sometimes happens with girls, especially, in a different era, I'm not that old, but I'm old enough, is that girls could sort of say, well, I don't really like math. I'm not that good at it. And teachers would say, okay, yeah, that's fine. You don't have to take that class. You can go into a different class that you could take, right? Whereas with boys, it'd be like, are you sure? I think if you just give it a chance, you'll go in that. So it's less specifically sexist and more just acculturated, right?
Right.
And so I was fine at math. But I hated it and I didn't pursue it. But then as I moved along in my career or in my education, it started to be a mountain that I wanted to climb. So I pursued, urban. My focus on my education was urban studies and planning. Which you say, how did that happen? How did I end up in a business school? So that's a little bit of a longer story. But as I kind of moved along, I decided I wanted to get more into economics, and to understand economics, you need a lot of math. So I did my PhD at MIT, and the math there is, so that was a mountain, but that was, it was an interesting mountain to climb, always believing that I hated math and then getting into it and thinking, oh, this is fantastic. This is so interesting. It shapes your mind.
Right.
It causes you to think totally differently about the world. It disciplines the way you think in a way that you don't get if you don't have that background.
Right.
Sorry, a little circuitous route here.
No, we're all about that.
Yeah. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do except that I was good at school. Mm-hmm. And except that I was good at school. And then when I got to college, I realized that I needed my life to be at least somewhat dedicated to finding ways to serve people who are suffering.
Yeah.
Right. That was something that.
Where did that come from? Was that innate, or was it parents or family, or?
It wasn't. It was, my parents and family were wonderful, and they were always, interestingly, I think as I got more into that idea of poverty alleviation and Christians' call to serve people or to find ways to alleviate poverty, my family got more into it. So it kind of went that way.
So you brought them more into it rather than them guiding you towards that.
Yeah. So when I was in college, I kind of had a moment where I realized, and part of this was Tony Campolo, where I realized that the call to doing justice was a significant part of a Christian's life. And for me, that became more about economic development. How do we provide people with opportunities that reflect their human dignity, and give people a chance to opportunities to grow and succeed and move out of poverty if they're in that situation, if they've been born into or had circumstances offered to them, or the structure of American society has held them back. So then after college, I moved to Buffalo, New York, and worked moved into a lower income neighborhood and worked with kids and families around education and community development. And that was, for me, I had grown up in the suburbs. I had not had an experience connecting to, people who were basically struggling to make it day to day and kind of figuring out what that looked like. And as I had that experience, I realized that I wanted to do more around, less around putting Band-Aids on the wounds and more about addressing the systems that were causing what I was seeing on the ground. So that was part of going on to get more education in the sort of fields of urban studies and then urban economics. So then, so that morphed from urban studies, it morphed into urban economics.
Got it.
So then from urban economics, I studied a lot of economics and that was my sort of into a business school. So when I applied to the Eastern role, I was applying for teaching economics, and that was in the business school.
Right.
So that connected me. So it's not the traditional path. Although I did do a lot of, I did work in international development for a number of years and worked, I've always been focused on economic development and small business development in urban communities. So I think that also connects up with the business side of things.
Yeah, because when you think of like calls to action, mission oriented work, you typically don't think MBA, because when I think of MBA, I think of maximize shareholder value, right? In fact, my master's is I do have an MBA, and I wasn't thinking at the time that I want to go do mission work to help marginalize communities.
Yep.
I was thinking I can get a banking job and make a lot of money, and so in fact that call to serve the underserved for me didn't happen until after my stint in financial services. And so it's kind of interesting because as the dean of the business school, you work for Eastern University, which has, faith, reason, justice, but then you're leading an MBA program that is I'm assuming, very corporate-y in a lot of its design, so how do those two things come together? Like an MBA, maximize shareholder profit, focus on all the top line revenue growth and all the key financial metrics of success with a mission orientation.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's all about how you think about mission, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you bring that up, because that is a distinction of Eastern's business programs, is that we're thinking about business as being not solely for maximizing profit, but really focused on transforming society. So business is a powerful, powerful tool for world transformation in terms of all the ways you end up treating your employees, the types of business you develop, the ways your business can interact in the community. So we talk about at Eastern, our mission is to equip students to become transformative change agents in business and beyond. So that's our focus. And we do that by talking, integrating into our curriculum the idea that business is a calling. So just like any other mission is a calling, business is a calling, and business is a calling to relationships, because every business transaction is an economic relationship. Right. And in every case, you can choose how you treat the other person on the end of that economic relationship. So that could look like creating a product that is truly a value for money, right? As opposed to trying to put out the cheapest thing to get the best buck, right?
Right.
So it could be how you create your products. It's how you set up your employee structure. Do you think about having a, cooperative relationship where, employees are shareholders in your company? So
Right.
improving the situation for them is actually part of, improving shareholder profit. Or do you treat them well? Do you have good policies around leave and well-being and work-life balance? How do you treat your employees? And then how are you engaged in your community? What does the business look like in terms of your brick and mortar, but also the online community? How do you treat people in that space? And then specifically, we also want to think about explicitly social businesses, right? So
Right.
there's a lot going on in that space, and it's very exciting around businesses that are creating products that do lift up the most marginalized people in society, or businesses like the Porter and Kramer model of creating shared value.
Right.
That's an older model, but it's still incredibly relevant. How do we make a profit, but create value in a whole bunch of different spaces, whether it's socially or environmentally or through the way we run our business?
Yeah, you mentioned social business. We refer to ourselves at the Lincoln Center as a social enterprise. But that's a fairly new trend, 10, 15 years ago. So again, I'm not that old, but old enough to quote you. But when my MBA experience, many decades ago, there wasn't a lot of talk about the mission or social business. It was mostly on the hard skills like accounting, multiple accounting classes, multiple finance classes, multiple economic classes.
Yeah.
We had one leadership class and
Mm-hmm.
like one ethics class, but everything else was all about the numbers.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, and I am not that close to the MBA programs in other universities. I'm familiar with Eastern's, but has that been a shift? Do you think all the MBA programs and business schools have been moving towards that? Or do you think what Eastern has is unique and special? Oh, I know you think it's unique and special,
Sure.
and it is. But are other schools moving in that way too, or is Eastern truly set apart and different than the other business schools?
It's interesting. I do think there is a trend toward that. I think this whole ESG, environment, social, and governance, it has become integrated into business language. How are we? Different companies are thinking about how they're responding to all of those individual pieces of making a better world, right? So I do think that it's getting reflected in other MBA programs, although I don't know how integrated I'm not super familiar with a ton of other, MBA coursework. But I don't see how you couldn't have some of that, especially in your leadership and ethics and management courses around that type of transformative engagement. I do see, when we were looking at developing Eastern's mission statement, I do see a lot of mission statements for business schools that are really about transforming the world. So I think because people want to transform the world.
Right.
People want to be tapped in that deep part of their spirits or their souls where, Frederick Buechner is a great theologian. He has this quote about your vocation, finding your vocation is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. And so people really are looking for that kind of connection that makes you joyful, but is also doing something in the world. And I do think that MBA programs are moving in that direction. And I think Eastern connecting that to faith, reason, and justice is a unique element.
Yeah. I know this is not about me, but I want to share my own story. So as I moved from engineering to business, I partly went into business because the engineering schools were missing something. Like you can be a great engineer, but they haven't taught you anything about business. And so you get as an engineer out in the business world. And I remember as a very young engineer, someone mentioned the word P&L. I said, what's P&L? They looked at me like, where did you get your degree? It's like, I got my degree in engineering. They didn't teach us about P&Ls. So in fact, that kind of one moment, kind of embarrassment, not knowing what that term is, that kind of spurred me into it's like, well, I better go get a business degree.
Yeah.
And then in the business school, there's very little on what I call soft skills, which I'm not sure is a good term anymore, but how to lead. Business schools don't necessarily teach you how to lead.
Yeah.
And I was now in the business world and in finance. I had all the technical skills, but I think people, particularly people who worked for me, could probably make the argument I wasn't a good leader. And so I felt like there was a couple of moments like, I need to learn some leadership skills.
Yeah.
And one way to learn it is just the school of hard knocks. You just make mistakes and then then you change. Yeah. Which I certainly had a lot of those. I had a lot of mistakes, and I learned from those mistakes. And I did become a better leader without necessarily formal training. But I did go get my PhD in organizational leadership, and I love the fact that Eastern has that program as well.
Yeah.
My question for you is, are there, and I'm assuming you would say that Eastern has a holistic, like when you graduate from Eastern, you're going to understand the technical skills you need to know. You're going to understand the balance between business and mission. You're going to understand leadership skills, communication skills, and that you have the whole package. But I just feel like so many degrees are siloed in their thinking, and it would be, I haven't found that, what's that perfect degree out there that kind of combines all those different skills? Or maybe it's not a degree, but it's maybe just the way within the degree, the curriculum is designed by the faculty. And so again, I'm bragging on Eastern again, but I feel like the Eastern students really have a good balance of all three.
Of the sort of leadership.
Hard skills, soft skills, but then this idea of a mission and calling.
Yeah. I think that's true. And it's interesting because it's very interesting when you think about the sort of hard skills, soft skills thing and the leader and the calling piece. So I was at a event for business deans fairly recently over at Villanova, and they had a panel discussion of employers, and it's a typical question: what do you want to see in students who are coming out of business programs, and what do you want to hire? And this might seem obvious, but it wasn't obvious to me. I was really expecting them to talk about analytics and Excel and AI of course, but they did not say that. They said, what we want to see is someone who is good relationally. That hands down, we can teach everything else and they'll learn everything else on the job, but they need communication skills and they need to be able to work well with people.
Wow.
And it was powerful for me because it's looking back, it seems obvious, but what are we teaching? Are we making sure that they're getting those types of skills?
So I'm wondering though if that is a function of where we are in society today. So that 20 years ago or 30 years ago, I don't think they would have said that, because generally speaking, students coming out of school, high school, undergrad, did have those social skills, relational skills. Yeah. I'm wondering how much of that is related to the current generation of growing up on the smartphone and social media, and they don't. Maybe it's not fair to say. I don't know. Is it fair to say that today's generation has less social skills just because of the adverse effects of technology? Technology brings a lot of benefits, but there's a downside too.
Well, that's the argument that Jonathan Haidt, I think that's how you say his name, is making in the Anxious Generation, which is a relatively recent book. I hesitate to paint a whole generation with a broad brush. I do think that we're seeing. I do think that plenty of research has shown that students are with both the rise of social media and the smartphone plus the pandemic. Right. We've seen that a lot at Eastern in how students are engaging in the classroom, right? Since the pandemic, coming to class at all, or how students engage when they're in the classroom and getting off their phones and getting off of the technology. It's a struggle.
Right.
It's a struggle. And you don't want to constantly be policing people because it is what it is, right? People have to make their own decisions.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is a tendency in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah. So going back to that conference you were at then, and so was there anything else surprising about that? Because it actually ties into one of the questions I had here, which is, what do you believe is the most critical skill students need to thrive in today's business world? And you just answered it. Basically, it's the relational skills.
It's how do you send an email that doesn't cause, how do you send a relational email that is efficient and to the point, but also, connects to people? How do you have those conversations? How do you look people in the eye and get along in general? How are you a personable human being? Yeah, that's what they wanted. It makes sense because you really can learn so many things on the job. But I think the question is, how do you teach that? Right. And I think you have to teach it. One of the things that we're really working on for our in-person undergraduate program is making sure that students are getting a lot of real-world experiences in the classroom. So one of our classes, our management information systems class at Eastern, has the students form teams, consulting teams, and then work with nonprofits or with small businesses to help them address a business problem using technology, right? And so sometimes that's giving them a social media plan and carrying it out for them, and building things with social media. Sometimes it's database management. Sometimes, so it depends. But just the process of engaging with a client for the whole class is incredibly powerful. And we're trying to give more of those experiences. We just connected up for our accounting majors in our tax class. We connected up with the VITA program, which is volunteers providing low-income help for low-income people doing their tax preparation. So as much of those real-world experiences as possible to give students connection with actual humans, right?
Right. I know this is very hard to do.
Yeah.
I can't think 5 to 10 years from now.
Oh, goodness.
And you can punt on the question, it's fine. But how do business schools generally need to evolve over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously the AI materials, we all need to be embracing AI and transforming. So we need to be transforming the assignments we use in a number of ways, because some assignments we need to AI proof, right? So we need to have more focused presentations, although as we know, that could change. Writing, we're going to be able to rely less and less on writing. We're going to have to, for writing assignments, we're going to have to transform how they're done and integrate AI into them. We're also going to need to integrate AI into and we talked about this a little bit before, into how we do create content for our courses, right? Whether it's avatars and videos and to make our work more efficient. But I think some of the future of, and we're seeing this already, some of the future of business schools is making sure that students are getting the skills they need. We talked about the soft skills, but they also need specific certifications and certificates. So one of the things that we're trying to do in a lot of our classes is, okay, can they come out with something that they can put on the resume as a skill? And so that was one of our goals for last year, was to integrate at least 4 things into our classes that are a new skill that they can put on the resume. So they do an Excel class and then they take a test and they get a certification. They take a class on financial services and they go take the SIE and they get that certification. So, and I mean, this isn't really anything new, but we're going to see that more and more because there are so many outside certifications, right? Our, project management covers the, for the PMP and all those things. So we're definitely moving in that kind of. So it's both the soft skills and those things that you can prove that you did and list on your resume. So I think we're seeing more of that.
Final question for you.
Yeah.
So I asked about Eastern 5 to 10 years. What about you in 5 years? Where do you see you in 5 to 10 years?
Like I said, I'm not.
You're in the moment.
Yeah, I'm in the moment. I take, a lot of people are thinking 5 to 10 years, and this is really for better, for worse. I think it probably would be better for me if I did think, but when I start to think about what I want to do in 5 to 10 years, my head gets a little buzzy. It's kind of like the snow on the old TVs, where I just don't do that, and I just wait for the next thing to come along. And it does. Now, that's a great privilege, and I acknowledge that things come along, and I fall into things, and it guides me on the path. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to say. I feel like I should respond in a certain way, but I don't have that. Yeah. But I will say that I want to be at Eastern. I really care about Eastern, and it is in my plan, whether or not that's the plan, to be at Eastern.
Right.
Yeah.
That idea, that notion of being in the moment, is what the Lincoln Center is all about. In fact, we have a phrase that we say, one moment, one choice, one connection at a time. And we have an exhortation to all of our staff, and a lot of our staff are teachers, social workers, counselors, to be present in every moment.
Yeah.
Because you never know that one moment may turn into a ripple effect that transforms lives.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what we're about, transforming lives and communities. Thank you for your time, Christa. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, GT. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
TLC Connections is supported in part by the Lincoln Center for Family and Youth. Through education, counseling, coaching, and consulting, we empower people to make positive choices, meaningful connections, and transformational change. To learn more, visit thelincolncenter.com.